So just remember what we're doing when we do this little thing. It's this little prayer. What we're doing, thinking simply, we're piling up all the marvelous things of the world in our mind, imagining it, using your creative imagination, and we're deciding to offer this to the Buddha as a request for the teaching. It's got very sweet meaning, it's auspicious. I mean, you never go empty-handed if you visit a friend. You don't go empty-handed if you ask for a coffee. You give them money. So it's like offering something in order to receive something. It's marvelous. It can be me and my dumb mouth speaking, but think of the teachings of the Buddha. That makes it very auspicious. So we're requesting the teachings. It's very nice meaning. You be the Umze. Come on then.
I'm the Umze. Yes, I'm also trying to book somebody else in. So
the Umze is the chant leader.
Umze. Okay,
Umze.
There you go.
Good. Where's the prayer though? It's not we can't see it.
It's in the chat, or shall I screen share?
Oh, I see. No, screen share is a lot easier, darling. Screen share.
Easy. Okay.
If that's easy for you, it's good for us.
Yeah, that's easy. It's fine.
Good.
Yeah.
There we go. Perfect. There it is. So just these are the Tibetan words, but just imagine what I said, thinking you're offering to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. Okay.
Sanji Perki Jujin Metog Tamri Rablimji Nide Genpadi Sange Jingdu Mete Drokun Namdag Jingla Chepasho Idam Guru Ratnam Diryatayami. Okay, very nice. Good. So just the second little one, I'll lead it, and it's two things, two parts. The first two lines, and I'll say it in English, and then we'll do 2 times in Tibetan. What we're saying basically is, assuming we are already Buddhists, you don't have to think that if you're not, until we are enlightened, we're going to say, the first 2 lines, until we are enlightened, we're going to rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Then the second 2 lines are expressing this marvelous kind of aspiration as a reason for why we're here together. The Tibetans call it a motivation. We're thinking we're going to, we're going to listen to these teachings, listen to it as advice so we can develop our amazing potential so that we can be a benefit to others, all the way to leading them to enlightenment, like long term. So thinking like that. And I'll sing 2 more times in Tibetan. Sangye chadang tsoke chognam la, jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi, dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki, drola penche sangye druppa shog. Sangye chadang tsoke chognam la, jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi, dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki, drola penche sangye druppa shog. Okie doke. Okay, I'm sure what we talked about, let's just reiterate what we said yesterday. If we're looking at Samsara and Nirvana, we're trying to understand what is Samsara so we can get the hell out of it and so we can get into Nirvana. I think, so what Samsara means is being caught up in all the rubbish in the mind. This is Buddha's very unique view. And he says he has found that we can get rid of that. So when you've got rid of the junk in the mind, you've achieved Nirvana. They're the simplest meaning. It's in the mind. It's all to do with the mind, not some place like heaven, Not like that. So I suppose we started off by talking about karma and the delusion. This is the essence of what we need to understand in order to know what samsara is, in order to know what suffering is, in order to know what the causes are, in order to get the hell out of it. So I think we talked about all that. Well, interestingly, there's a book of Rinpoche's that's come out, Lama Zopa Rinpoche's, which I happen to edit, so I'm familiar with it, that came out a few years ago as one titled How to Enjoy Death, but now it's changed. It's a paperback version now, and it's called How to Face Death Without Fear. And I really highly recommend it. It's all of Lama Zopa's teachings over the years, all compiled. I mean, not that much actually, but then really the 2/3 of the book is like a handbook. It's all the practices. So all these different things he recommends at different stages. So basically the first part is what is death and why we have so much fear at death. And this is the Buddhist approach, of course, because the Buddhist view, the fundamental view, is we come into this life and we'll leave it. We won't disappear. We don't come out of nothing and we won't go into nothing. So the crucial thing is, of course, like talking as we're talking here, we want to, if we understand the Buddhist view of samsara, we want to get the hell out of it. We don't want to be born in the lower realms. We don't want to be born in the useless suffering experiences. We talked about suffering, I'm sure. So we talked about the bigger picture of suffering, which is the other realms of existence, which is not totally unique to the Buddha, but he's got his own take on it.
So at least if we are in samsara, we want to at least be born another decent human body. Bare minimum, another decent human mother, decent human father, reasonable conditions, reasonable sanity, reasonable kind of enough money in the bank and access to good things. Why? So that you can carry on practicing your spiritual path uninterrupted. We don't want to keep falling down again. So it's a very practical issue. So one of the crucial things, and Rinpoche says in this book, this is a lot to do with that topic anyway, so I'm going to come to your point very clearly. Is that, if you want to help anybody in this life, when they need you most is right then at the time of death. This is a very technical point. So the point is, the Buddhist view, as we were talking yesterday probably, every millisecond of what we think and do and say is a karma, an action, starting with the mind. The mind drives it, and the body and speech do things. The body and speech are like the servants of the mind, okay? So all that is like this process of programming. Buddha would have really liked that concept. It's a process of constant programming. Just like you do when you play piano or you cook cakes, you keep getting better at it. If you keep killing, you keep getting better at it. If you keep being loving and kind, you keep getting better at it. It's the same process. So the Buddha says we've got this potential to lessen the neuroses and therefore lessen the rubbish that we do with our body and speech to harm others, which then lessens our own suffering. And it's the first stages of practice. It's crucial. So at the time of death, it's very technical and it's described in great detail in the book. And the process of death, which is coming from the Vajrayana teachings, you don't find it in the sutras. Or therefore you won't hear it in the Zens, you won't hear it in the Theravadan. It's in the Tibetan Buddhists because it's the Vajrayana. And it's a very detailed description of the deconstruction of the components of a person. It's very interesting. Divided into sort of 8 categories, 8 stages, and each of those various things cease to function. So it's a crucial thing to become familiar with. For ordinary people, so that at least you're sort of like you're doing your drive. If you've got a driving test in a month, you don't just say, I'll be okay on the day. No, you won't. You better start driving right now. So when you get to the day, you're ready for it. This is exactly the point. One can meditate on this. One can become familiar intellectually with it. And then when you're on the day, you've lessened your fear because you're familiar with it. There's lots more involved. But it's a really crucial thing to know. And at about a second or third of these 8 stages, which is the gradual deconstruction of the senses, your eyes go, your ears go. About this point, this very specific thing kicks in. There's two, okay, without too much detail, but it's good detail. There's another process that's described, which from the sutras, and it's the 12 links of dependent arising. Well, as we know, the 12 links of dependent arising is Buddha's detailed description of actually how we create samsara minute by minute. We should be discussing this. We'll see what happens. But at the time of death, it has a particular function. And each of those, the 8th and 9th ones are called craving and grasping. Now, they're kicking in every second of the day, and they're just different words for attachment. Attachment is like the fundamental drive of samsara. I think we need to talk more about that. It's something way more subtle and more nuanced and more pervasive than we can even imagine in ordinary terms, So this attachment kicks in very strongly, and this is why Rinpoche says there's so much fear at death, because we have this immense attachment. And what are we attached to? More than sex, drugs, rock and roll, families, friends. It's to me. And what is me is the body. As far as we're concerned, this is me. So this intense grasping, intense attachment, and that's why there is fear, because you can't bear to let go. So one of the functions of attachment is to always think of something to get it and anticipate and blah, blah, and then go to manipulate to get it. One of the functions of attachment is when you've got it, to hold on to it. This is clear, we know this in daily life. The pain of letting go, then all the time anticipating something more. So here the craving, number 8 of the links, intense craving to hold on to this, fear of letting go. I mean, this cliched term, letting go, it's very profound. Then the grasping kicks in, which is even more powerful. So when these kick in, this is the moment when the karmic seed, this is about the 2nd stage, 3rd stage, when your ears and eyes starting to go, you're starting to lose the plot, but you still got your wits about you a bit. And then that triggers the number 2 of these links, which is the karmic seed that you've planted, remembering that everything you think and do and say is drop seeds in your bank vaults. You've got all these different bank vaults. The main bank vault is the karmic seeds that will produce the life you get, human, animal, whatever. The other bank vaults are the tendencies you'll get, the experiences you'll have, the environmental result, 3 other ways that karma ripens. We have to go into this as well. We've got another talk tomorrow, right? Haven't we? Or is this the last one? Tomorrow as well. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, so then so we want the karmic seed to be a virtuous one, and specifically we want the karmic seed to be bare minimum a non-killing one, and we have to go into the details about karma and details about the mind. Because why? Because non-killing, conscious intentional non-killing, in particular practice in the framework of living in vows of non-killing, is the cause of how come we have got a human body. So the time of our past death, We could have been a kangaroo, as Lama Zopa says, But a karmic seed of our past from 57 lives ago, it doesn't matter how long, there's billions of seeds in there from countless lives. And the conditions of our death are the conditions that are conducive. So if you're peaceful at death, that is a perfect conducive condition to trigger a virtuous karmic seed. So we have to deduce that we were somehow, one of the virtuous karmic seeds of our past killing was triggered at that time, and by that point, even before we stopped breathing, we already programmed ourselves to go to our present mummy's human womb. She mightn't even have met our daddy by now. So they do not make us. They merely hop into bed, they provide the condition, and then once our mind leaves the body, and this is where it's related to the organs now, the mind can leave the body at least 3 days after you've stopped breathing. Because the Buddhist view is there's 8 stages of death. The gross level, gross consciousness, we've got gross consciousness, subtle consciousness, very subtle consciousness. So gross consciousness is the sensory and the conceptual, the gross level of us, which is all we posit as existing in the West. That's why when you stop breathing, you're ready for the body bag, not for the Buddha. Your subtle consciousness is now functioning, but just not evident because it doesn't need a brain. And then there's a very subtle consciousness. So this gradual deconstruction. But about the second stage, in our past life, we must have had some kind of condition that was relatively peaceful. Certain things triggered this virtuous karmic seed. We were already programmed, in my case, to go to my mummy's womb while she was, my mummy Agnes Bliss, they called her Billy. My mummy Billy Bliss was in bed with Teddy Courtin. Okay, and then a few weeks after I left the body, I was in an intermediate state, we'll go into this roughly, and then when they hopped into bed, my mind ran like a magnet. I hopped in. So we create the cause. So you want a human your life, baby, and you can see if you look at the whole universe, if we take even the animals as non-humans, there's 7, probably even in Scotland, you've got 7 billion mosquitoes in Margot's backyard in the summer. So there's clearly it's easier to get a mosquito birth, a dog birth, an animal birth, not to mention the others. Much harder to get a human. So honeys, we want a human. And don't think this is being rude about animals, It's a contextual thing. If you want a long neck, be a giraffe, definite. If you want to fly, be a bird. You want to use your noggin and have some intelligence and work out the meaning of life, be a human, baby. So we need a human body, bare minimum. And that karma is triggered before you stop breathing. So then you go through the stages and you stop breathing, and then your subtle mind is there. And that's the same 8 stages occur every time we go to sleep. It's exactly the same, physiologically, psychologically, according to this Vajrayana model. So, once you stop breathing, sleep is when the senses have ceased. It's obviously not as radical as death because you're still breathing, you're still there, But your subtle mind is your dream mind. It's the same mind, the same level of consciousness, which is not the gross level. That's more subtle, it can be more powerful, and the yogis can use these experiences. They can train themselves. So the time of death, so let's say you've decided in advance to give your organs. In the book, there's all these stages of practice, stages of advice. The first part is background information about the 8 stages, what it is, the process, the 12 links, lots of different things. Then there's the actual advice. The first section is the weeks and months before you pass away. And it's framed in terms of helping others. It's evident it's about helping yourself too. Then there's all the different practices to do you can. What to see, what to taste, what to taste, what to see, what to listen to, what to think about. Lots of different things where you can help your loved one. Then there's the what to do the hours before death, what to do the time the breath the breath stops, and that's not death yet. Then what to do the next 3 days when the mind is likely still there. And this is a really powerful time. And then finally what to do after the mind has left the body. And then what to do the next 49 days. It's a whole series of rites in chronological order. And the back of the book, 2/3 of the book really is the back of the book. That's where all the practices are, all numbered from 1 to 87. Mantras, prayers, sutras. You don't have to do most of them. You can do one if you like, And as Lama Zopa says, if you're going to choose one, choose Medicine Buddha. It's amazing. So as Rinpoche says, this is an education we all need. Doctors and nurses' job is to take care of the body. Our job is to take care of the mind. There's lots of things to talk about here. So anyway, in relation to organs, one of the sections is what to do once the breath has stopped, which is when we think death is. So one scenario is what to do if your loved one dies at home, and that's the best actually. The ideal scenario is really be in a quiet place. Nurses and doctors and hospitals are so kind, but it's about the worst place to die. Because one of the things that occurs is, and this Rinpoche stresses it continuously, is the mind is, as you're getting sicker and getting towards death, the mind is incredibly sensitive to the slightest disturbance. There's a whole bunch of advice about you keep the conducive environment peaceful all the time, quiet and peaceful. So, The scenario is what to do if your loved one dies at home. That's the best. Keep it there for 3 days. Do prayers and practices around the clock. Then what to do if your loved one dies in a hospital or an institution, and you've got 30 minutes if you're lucky there, you know. What to do if your loved one dies suddenly. What to do if your loved one gives their organs. So this is a really interesting topic. All the lamas I've ever heard have always praised this as an incredible practice for the person who's dying, because when you have this compassionate motivation, you want to give your organs. It's so compassionate. But what was fascinating, I didn't know much about what happened to death. I didn't know what happened when they take your organs. I just assumed they leave you there quietly, and then when the mind is gone, say, now take my grandma's organs. No. What they do is, and I only learned this, and so then, and I remember asking questions of Lama Zopa about the book. So I told him about this. He didn't know about that. I think most of the lamas didn't know about that, actually what happened. So as we know, the moment you stop breathing, they keep you breathing. And interestingly, very interestingly, fascinating actually, while I'm doing this book, I read a book by an American medical journalist called Nick Teresi, and it's called The Undead. But it's not about zombies. It's all the conflicts and problems and obstacles. He's a medical journalist, about all the problems now. And he was clearly quite cynical about the industry. He's not criticizing people's motivation, but the cynicism of the industry, and you pointed out many European countries now, and this is just because of all the lobbying of the industry. And he was sort of elitist. He seems like a really thorough journalist, you know. And just he was really criticizing many aspects of the industry, forcing people. I mean, that law alone is so shocking now. Most people don't even know about it. So the default is you take the organs unless you say otherwise. And where does that come from? The lobbying of that industry. So he's quite cynical about the way they work. They're quite aggressive. They're the elitist of all the doctors, the most expensive, blah, blah. But I mean, whatever. It's just his reports, okay? I'm not giving my opinion. I know nothing about it. But what was fascinating, there's a real conflict now. This is a part of the book. That's why I call it the Undead. There's a real conflict now because of people can completely confuse when death happening. And one of the major reasons is because, you know, over centuries, all cultures have always reported experiences of people who, quote unquote, come back to life. But of course, the medical profession just ignores that as some idiocy. Not interested. It doesn't fit their model. So now they're having serious experience of this. People whose liver they're about to cut out, they bloody well come back to life. What a bore, you know? I mean, I'm being a bit sarcastic. So it's really kind of interesting, and he's reporting this in depth. It's mostly in the States. That's his expertise. The other one was, he had a whole chapter, and he himself is atheist, and he cracks jokes. He's a very funny fellow. It's a wonderful book, The Undead. He interviewed many different religions about their view, but unfortunately he never interviewed a Tibetan Buddhist. I always keep thinking I'll write to him and tell him some of the evidence, because they're the ones doing all the researching. His Holiness, you know, doing incredible research on exactly this topic. He'd be fascinated. I keep meaning to write to him. I will. So the thing is, he had this whole chapter on people who experience out-of-body experiences while they're under anesthetic. So, of course, the medical profession, mostly, that's just ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous, nonsense. Of course, they're not conscious. They ignore. But it's interesting, he had one woman, he joked about it, this one woman, who had to have such a radical procedure that they had to practically make her dead before they operated on her, which means from their point of view, there's not a possibility of a millimetre of consciousness. But he joked how she reported the most vivid experience. They can't deny this, you know. You can't deny this evidence. It must freak people out because it's upsetting all their assumptions. But it's brilliant because it's forcing people to think about it. When is death? So this is fitting exactly with the Vajrayana view. That, you know, 3 days after, there's not just the gross consciousness, there's subtle consciousness, and then there's even very subtle. And it's at least 3 days before the consciousness totally leaves the body. So, I remember one doctor quoted in this book saying, he's in this industry, I can now say with certainty that consciousness is not a function of the brain. I don't know what it is, but this much I can say. I think this is brilliant, you know. So the difficulty, when I talked to Rinpoche, and it's in the book, Rinpoche's advice is in the book, when I told him that this is what happens, how they keep the body alive, that means the mind is in the... So he said, with certainty, if the body can breathe, if the body, and he's implying this is warm and toasty and the heart's beating, of course that's the indication there is consciousness there. But the materialists think you're keeping a dead body alive because they think the body is just a brain. So it's really interesting. So in other words, if it's a real dead body, which means the mind has actually left, you could never get it to breathe. You couldn't get it to get warm and the heart beat again. Not a possibility. Of course, this is the Buddhist view. So it's just positing the view that there is a thing called consciousness, which is not a function of the body. So the difficulty then is that when you
the first four stages of death are the senses ceasing to function. So as we know, if you're even asleep, you open the eyelid, the eye can't see. You touch a person, they can't feel, because this is. Let's go into. Maybe I should go into more detail here. Yeah, I will. Okay. So this is based upon the Vajrayana model of the universe, really, which is, and His Holiness teaches on this. It's wonderful books on this death process. It's a wonderful book by His Holiness, and translated by Jeffrey Hopkins, called The Mind of Clear Light, and the subheading. It used to be called Dying and Death, but they changed it. They didn't like the idea of death, I suppose. But it's really excellent commentary by His Holiness on a text by the Panchen Lama on the death process. It's very detailed. There's Lama Zopa's book, and there are some others, but Lama Zopa's is full of advice and all these practices to do, So the point is, these 8 stages, we've got gross consciousness, which is the sensory, based upon the brain, the eyeballs, the ear, and all the business. That's the body, and they've got gross consciousness and gross body. That's the grossest level, and that's all we posit in the West. Now, when you stop breathing, and the body, the senses have ceased, but the subtle consciousness, and that's every time we go to sleep, that's what we go. We wake up into a dream state. That's our subtle mind. So then that's inextricably linked with a subtle physical energy. And this is similar to the Chinese system, vaguely, and similar to the Ayurvedic, but this is the Tibetan Buddhist, which is based on the Vajrayana coming from India. And this is highly technical, this is a description of the physical energy. And this is the system the Tibetan medical system uses. So we've got subtle consciousness, which is basically our thoughts, mental. They're more subtle than the sensory. We can still access them during the gross daily life, but they're subtle in their nature. So we have subtle mind, which is our different states of mental. Then you've got the subtle body, which is made up of different components. The subtle nervous system. They say there's 72,000 subtle channels coursing through our body. It's physical, but you can't see with a microscope. Coursing through those channels is all these different wind energies, prana, air energy. And the Tibetan medical system, they study for 15 years all these different winds, because this is the balance of these winds is what health is. Now, inextricably linked with those winds are all our different states of mind. This is not like neuroscience for sure. So your Tibetan doctor, she'll feel your pulses. And she will see the imbalance of this particular wind, and she knows it's related to your attachment. Because your attachment energy has gone berserk, that's why you're having anxiety and panic attacks. Or it could be anger energy, whatever. This is their system. It's a totally holistic, the most holistic system you can imagine. And they can even know about karma. It's totally holistic, I remember this, because they can read the body and they can read the mind from this, because the mind, the subtle mind, mental consciousness states, and the winds are inextricably linked. So I remember this wonderful story one time, a book we published in Wisdom when I was there years ago. It was called In Exile from the Land of Snows, and it was just interviews with different Tibetans who came into exile. And one of them was an interview with this doctor, a Tibetan doctor, maybe His Holiness's doctor, back in the 70s. And he was in New York, had no English, and he was invited by the young doctors to do the rounds of the hospital in the morning to meet the patients, So he was given one old fellow to test, to check up on. He didn't ask a single question. He sat there for 45 minutes checking his pulses. And the Tibetan doctor proceeded to give a complete history of this dude's health from the time he was born. The young doctors were impressed, because they can literally read the body and the mind. This is a totally integrated system, and this is based on the Vajrayana system, based upon Buddhist teachings, right? So anyway, the subtle body and subtle mind. And then you've got the third component is the subtle liquid energy called the Kundalini, subtle red and white. And the seed of these come from the mummy and daddy. When our consciousness joins the egg and sperm at the time of conception, what the subtle consciousness actually is joining a subtle physical energy called the red and white drops, or the Kundalini, from the mummy and daddy. And then that's when you start at the heart chakra. You start in the womb, your consciousness conjoined with this subtle red and white drop, and that stays there throughout your life, and you grow then from there. And then when the death process is this deconstruction, everything comes back to this subtle drop, and when the subtle drop opens, and your very subtle consciousness, now the subtlest one, when that leaves, that's death. That can be 3 days after you stop breathing. So the very subtle consciousness is what they call the clear light consciousness, the subtlest level of your mind, the subtlest level. So the difficulty, the problems that are evident from the Buddhist perspective of giving your organs is this. As Lama Zopa says, of course you're alive. But he says, because your senses have ceased, it doesn't follow that you'll experience any problems. So, most people probably don't report out-of-body experiences on the operating table. I've had a couple of procedures. I have no memory of it.
was very delicious, this anesthetic. It's the best sleep you'll ever have. I love it. I wish I could take anesthetic every night. It'd be heaven. Just you go into this deepest sleep. It's just heaven, It's the deepest sleep I've ever had. Of course it is. It was so delicious, I'll never forget. Anyway, this is a side event. It's not the point. So anyway, these reports. So the point is this. I'm saying many things here. I'm trying to get it done. For most people, it won't be a problem. The problem, though, is, this is indicated by one of the stories this doctor told, and this journalist, it was fascinating. And this is what I told Rinpoche, that this woman who was giving her organs, she was on the operating table, ready to be cut open. As far as they're concerned, she's dead. And the nurse monitoring the heartbeat on a computer said the moment they got the circular saw ready to cut her open, now remember, her senses have ceased. She's not physically feeling pain. But this is what's fascinating. She said the moment they got the circular saw to cut her open, the heart went from 100 to 200 beats a minute. And the author cracked a joke. I wonder what a dead person has to be worried about. Something like that. Now, this is easy to deduce from this system that she is having what we call an out-of-body experience. So first of all, an out-of-body experience you're not leaving your body. It feels like that, but that's just subtle mind. And because the subtle mind is more subtle, when you're fast asleep, your gross senses have ceased. And people have this in their dreams. People have what we call astral traveling. This is exactly what subtle mind is. And this is the capacity for clairvoyance. And we can all have this if we've done practice in the past, and we can practice now. We can engage in our subtle mind. So that basically you can deduce that this woman's subtle mind, like people who have an out-of-body experience while they're on an anesthetic, she's floating. She has the experience of floating above her body, but she's not. It's in the mind, in the body, but she's seeing what they're doing. So of course she's going to have a panic attack. She knows she's still Mary. Jesus God, don't they know I'm not dead yet? And she's going to have a panic attack. Of course her heart will go to 200 beats a minute. Now that's the problem. This is the thing. Okay, more things. If when you die, when the breath stops, before the breath stops, and the virtuous karmic seed is triggered, that becomes the one that will determine your next life. But it's still very fragile. If your body's knocked around and chucked into the bin, or that can disturb the mind, and then that could trigger a negative karmic seed, and that could replace the positive karmic seed. That's a possibility. So then, in this case, this woman, let's assume a virtuous karmic seed was triggered when she passed away. That triggered a virtuous the virtuous thought, that triggered her virtuous karmic seed, which determined she get a future human life. But there she is, after several days or whatever, on the operating table. Her mind is still there, and she's having a complete freak out. That can cause a negative karmic seed to be triggered, and then she'll have a suffering rebirth in the lower realms. That's the danger. That's the only danger. There's no danger to the person. They're dead. Eventually they're going to be, but it's the danger to changing the karma of the person. So Rinpoche says there are lots of practices you can do to help reverse that. A lot of that is in the book. But this is why it's important to be so careful. As all Rinpoche said was, and then he said, well, the hospitals have to be careful. So of course it's not their model. But that's the only danger. So the point is, though, there, Mark, most people won't have that experience. Most people will be totally unaware of what's going on, so won't have fear. And if you die with a virtuous state of mind, it will trigger a virtuous karmic seed. And Rinpoche really praises anybody who wants to give their organs. But that can be the danger. That can be the danger. It can disturb the mind. And that means a negative karma can be triggered, and you'll have a suffering rebirth. That is the one, and that's the only danger. Are you clear, Mark?
Oh, thanks for that. It answers it. And I have to say, the reason why I asked the question is I had out-of-body experiences.
There you go.
So that's...
then it could easily mean you could have that while you're on the operating table while they're about to cut you open. So, the thing is, not to be cynical. I mean, anybody who gives their organs, Rinpoche said, is unbelievable. It's like a body site for action. But if there are these dangers to the person that could end up causing you to go to the lower realms, that's not cool. So that's the only danger. That is the danger. There's no danger to the person now because you're finished. It's the next life. There are things you can do, but this is why once the mind has even stopped, once the breath has even stopped, it's so crucial not to disturb the person. For the next 3 days, it's like a holy place in that room. You don't sit there and have parties and shout and yell, because even the subtle mind of a person who's passed away, if you can be conscious on the operating table, you can be conscious right then. And this is why people who have conscious while they're having their dreams, you can be aware of what's going on. So always when a person's sick and dying, totally peaceful, only the sound of prayers and virtuous things that help the person's mind. So if you've got the tendency to have those experiences, which is really just your subtle mind seeing things, you're not leaving your body, it feels like that, then that's very possible that can happen. And the other thing, from my own personal view, not being rude about people who want to give their organs, there's two things. There's people and their compassion to want to give organs and how amazing it is, and the lucky recipients. But there's the arrogance of I'm sorry, this is what he was pointing out, and it's his industry. He's allowed to have this view. I know nothing about it. But my sense is, if you have the view of reincarnation, it's not the best thing on the planet to give people, it's nice to keep people alive, but we've got another life coming, for God Almighty's sake. And the Buddhist view is concentrate on the next life. So, we can see if it's based on attachment, it's a mess. And all the lobbying, he was so cynical about the politics of it all. One woman whose child had died and whose organs were used for another child, she was so moved by all this, she started working in some place that worked in this industry. And she's so cynical after a while, she gave it up. I can't say all the facts. No, I'm not trying to disturb your mind. It's up to you to read the book if you want. And then all these, especially European countries, all changing their laws. And who's doing all this? It's the lobbying of these doctors. Who else? It's so inappropriate. Forcing parents being forced to give their children. He was really it's very interesting. And that's his own experience from being a journalist in this industry. So my own personal opinion, there's so many ways you can benefit others. Give your body, your smelly old body, once you're really dead, give it to the young doctors to learn about anatomy. That's just as helpful. There's so many ways to benefit, So, it's moving, and I know people who've received organs. Of course, it's marvelous. It's very special. But there's other ways to benefit sentient beings. And if there's a danger it can distress your mind, then don't. That would be that's the decision you have to make. Do you understand?
Fully.
Good,
and
good, darling.
Thank you.
Good.
That was excellent.
Good. Thank you. Fantastic. Okay. So now we've got questions. Maybe ask some more questions. Because this topic, I know over the years, doing courses on this book, these teachings, I remember funeral directors come, Christians come, people want, and this is for pets as well. You want to know how to help. People are so happy to help their pets, for example. People love this advice, even if they're not Buddhist, Many of the practices do like mantras and prayers, and it's just nice to have a view. Buddhism is renowned for its really clear, especially Vajrayana, it's clear views of exactly what happens, It's very helpful. Anyway, are there any questions while we're at it? About anything? Well, I've got a feeling I've got to go into more detail both about junior school, which is karma, and high school, which is the mind, because this is the nuts and bolts of the work you have to do to get out of samsara and to get into your nirvana. Okay, so we've got to go into more detail. I think we talked about the Four Noble Truths, and we talked about suffering. We just discussed the first kind of suffering, which is the suffering of suffering, which is when the bad things happen. So that's either the big picture, meaning the lower realms, or looking into this human life, look at the way we have suffering. And this is also the suffering of suffering, when the bad things happen to us. We really understand this one. So there's 4 ways our karma ripens, okay? Let's go into these details. Every millisecond of what we think and do and say sows seeds in the mind and can ripen in any of 4 ways. The negative ones ripen as suffering, and the positive ones ripen as happiness, simply speaking. It's obviously very nuanced, and there's degrees, obviously. So basically, the first way our karma ripens is, like I'm talking about death, and this is the one that's triggered at the time. They're all triggered at the time of death, before you stop breathing, these karmic seeds. Is the one, your main bank vault is one that contains the seeds that will produce your next life. Dog, human, spirit, whatever it might be. The type of rebirth. So the main thing at death is to have all the conditions conducive so that you can ensure that at least you get another decent human mummy, so you can keep on moving on your path. That's the thing. And it's a rare thing to get a decent human life, with respect. Now, we can see within human lives, have a look at the world, the 3 other ways. Look at your own life. When we can understand this level of karma, just these 4 ways that our karma ripens, it really helps you understand why things happen. We're so confused normally. We might say, oh, it's all karma. Well, what do you mean? Oh, I don't know the details. That's like saying, oh, it's all botany outside in the ground. It's just botany. I believe in botany. But if you don't know what grows what, you're in big trouble. You've got to know the facts, So the bare facts are these. The next 3 ways our karma ripens in this human life, and these are all these seeds, all these sort of bank vaults, the seeds in these are all triggered at the time before you stop breathing. You're programmed completely already, So the next one is, look into our lives, you've got 3 things that are ripening. One is your tendencies, your mind itself. A body is a body. Hitler had one, Mother Teresa had one. Where's the difference? Is their mind. The tendencies in their mind, their personality traits, their characteristics. This is the difference. And these are not from my parents. This is such a radical point, such a clear point that's crucial to understand. You do not get one atom of your mind from your parents. This is the biggest shock for the materialist view. The biggest shock. We get our genes, yeah. DNA, yeah. Brain, yes. But that ain't your mind, baby. That's the physical. You get your tendencies, your tendency to be good at music, your tendency to be good at football, your tendency to be good at love or kindness or killing or anger or psychosis. Look at the world, please. These are tendencies that you come into in this life, guess what, from having done them before. It's hardly rocket science. Why are you good at piano today? Because you've practiced it before. Why is a little child good at piano at the age of 2? It's because they've practiced it before. Why does some little boy want to go and kill the ants? Because they've practiced it before. You don't come into this life fresh and then get molded by your mummy and daddy. You come into this life programmed with your own tendencies. This is called tendencies or intentions, if you like, similar to the cause. This is your actual mind, your personality traits. Now, the second way your karma ripens is called experiences similar to the cause, which is, we're very social beings, aren't we? We have mummies and daddies and aunties and uncles and rats and cockroaches and sisters and next door neighbors, and we live in a very intense social environment with lots of other sentient beings. And this is the next karma, and this is so simple. If you look at your life, it's so simple. From the time you're born up to now, think about it. You've touched upon, you've been impacted upon by countless beings: dogs, rats, ants, mosquitoes, beloved husbands, ugly sisters, people at work who kill you, hate you, love you, you name it. Look at your experiences, and you can divide them into two experiences: the nice ones and the ugly ones. So simple. It's so simple. So you get lied to. What's that the fruit of? Having lied. You don't get believed. What's that the fruit of? Not telling the truth. You get stolen from because you've stolen. You get harmed because you've harmed. You get loved because you've loved. You win the lottery because you've been generous. People steal from you because you've stolen. So it almost seems too simplistic. The logic almost seems too simplistic because it's not punishment, not reward. We do it ourselves. We program our mind with those tendencies to either have the tendency to do it, or we program our mind as a result of doing it with it happening to us. Think of your life. We're totally social beings. And look at the way we suffer is mainly in relation to what happens to us, isn't it? You suffer because of sickness, let's say. That's really intense. You suffer certainly because you've got tendencies, your mind's berserk, but you suffer at the hands of others. And happiness happens at the hands of others as well. So this is what we mean by happiness and suffering, basically. Having the nice things happen and not having the ugly things happen. This is called experiences similar to the cause. The fourth one, or the third in this life, is called actually environmental karma. It's the very way the physical world impacts upon you. We all live in environments. We don't just float around in the sky, do we? So let's just use one example of non-killing. The conscious intentional non-killing first will ripen. Let's say in our case, it was triggered at the time of our past death, and it programmed us to go to our present mother's human womb a few weeks later. That's the fruit of non-killing. And as Lama Zopa says, the type of life we've got with all the good conditions and wanting to practice spiritual path, this is the result of living in vows. We're going to go into this, of non-killing. Vows are stupendous, give such power to our actions, So we must have practiced non-killing and non-stealing and good ethics in the context of living in vows. Amazing. So we got the result of non-killing is our case, a human body. Now second, look at your mind. Now look at the minds of most humans. Unfortunately, they've got the human body. Hitler, one of his bank vaults of good karmic seeds of non-killing was triggered at the time of his death, and he ran to his little mummy's Austrian womb a few weeks later. He got a human body, the fruit of virtue. But look at his tendencies now. Look at his mind. Look at his tendencies. You can deduce them from his actions. Have a look at them. That's from his past habits. So ours, look into your tendencies to be loving, kind, good at music, good at math, intelligent, not intelligent, kind, angry, you name it. These are your habits. This is the most powerful point about karma, is that it's our stuff. This is the real meaning. It's our stuff. Whereas we believe we're this innocent victim who was given anger and jealousy by our mummy and daddy. No wonder we want to sue them. It's fundamentally different, And we're not made by our creator. No view like that. The third way, look at your life. in which your karma ripens from the past, is the experiences, how you're seen and treated by others, basically. So look at your life. People have harmed you, lied to you, loved you, been kind to you, generous to you. Each one of those is the fruit of actions like that you have done, and guess what? Karma's personal to them. If you sow a seed in the ground there, guess what? That's where the fruit will come, not over there, for God's sake. I don't grow a seed in my garden and Margot gets the tree. That's a joke. So you don't sow a seed. When you punch a person in the nose, you sow the seed right there in your mind in relation to that person. You create this connection with that person. Well, guess what? 17 lives later, they'll punch you back. I mean, speaking simplistically. Karma has to be personal. It's logic. It can't be a person who you have never met or harmed cannot possibly harm you. A person you've never been kind to cannot possibly be kind back to you. We're talking many, many lifetimes here. This is the logic of it, you know. You've got to think about this, of course. Which means if it's the law of karma, nothing's random. This is very shocking to us. So shocking we almost can't believe it. The fourth way, which is the third way in this life, that you're... So the result of non-killing as a tendency is you wake up in this life with no thought to kill. Now look at the world. I'm going back to the second one. The intention is similar to the cause. The action is similar to the cause. The tendency is similar to the cause. Most humans have got the human body, but look, most humans kill. Most humans have got the tendency to keep killing. And, you know, we can describe this. It's so powerful. Because they haven't lived in vows. That's the big reason to live in vows. A person who comes into this life and gets a human life, but then has a tendency to go fishing or kill the ants or kill the roaches or kill humans, whatever, you know, we all kill something. And in our culture, it's totally normal, you know. You've been in the lower realms in the past as a result of killing. You've exhausted that option, exhausted that karma. The petrol tank ran out. But then this is the tragedy. You haven't purified all aspects of the killing. So you wake up in this life, you get the human body, but you continue to kill. This is the main tragedy. I always use this example. It must be 100 200 times I've told this story. In the 90s, I met this woman in Kopan who heard the teachings from Lama Zopa about karma, and she came to my room in tears. Her beautiful boy, who died a few years before, he was 29. He was a fisherman all his life. A lovely boy, but a fisherman, lived in Northern California. And he drowned, he died at the age of 29 scuba diving. So she wanted to know where he was reborn. She'd never thought of karma before. And she was devastated, you know. I said, I don't know. But go and ask Geshe Lama Kontrong, you know, this wonderful yogi who lived in the mountains for years, naked, no food, no sleep, no anything, lived in Vajrayogini's Pure Land, Lama Zopa says. You know, he passed away 20 years ago at Kopan. He's an amazing, great yogi, extraordinary. I've been doing his biography, but then the attendant told me to stop 10 years ago, but we're starting it again. It's so moving, I tell you. So he was at Kopan at the time. I said, I don't know, but go and ask him. So anyway, the point, before I tell you a story. So the thing is, there's this little boy. He wakes up in this life. He's got a human body. He won the lottery. Got a human mummy. He's got tendencies. And he's a kind boy. He's got lots of good tendencies. Kind, generous, loving, respectful. Many, many good tendencies. A really nice person. But like most humans, he's got a tendency to kill. And of course, in our culture, killing fish is a noble thing. You know, these days a bit more. People don't like to see fish dying. But it's not as bad as killing poodles, is it? If you went and go and killed a poodle, you'd be put in prison for 27 years. Because we're attached to poodles. Fish, we kind of like to eat their bodies, you know, but so we kind of gloss over the harm. So he had a tendency to kill. So this is how karma works. This is the technology of samsara, when we're born, how and why, the playing of these different components of us. So basically what happened is he's been in the lower realms in the past. He's exhausted that karma. He's finished it. The petrol tank runs out of his killing karma. But in like a miracle, one of his virtuous karmic seeds in the main bank vault is triggered. He gets his human mummy. Then he has all these tendencies, good tendencies that fit the human mind, kind, loving, but he hasn't run out all the karma, so he's got the residual result of killing, and this is the tragedy, and he wakes up in this life with a tendency to kill. No one taught him. His mother didn't like fishing. But the moment he went fishing, like age 5 or something, I don't know, this is how karma works. The karmic seed is there, the tendency to kill. It's there. He hasn't purified it. He sees the fishing. The karma is instantly, the karma is triggered. It's like a memory. Some people you know so strongly when you met them, you know. You know immediately this person. That's the karmic connection between you. That's the extent of your history with each other. You bump into each other again, like, where have you been all my life, you know? That's because you've got strong karmic history. It's the same with activities. Little girl who goes to the gym, she sees gymnastics on telly, and she's 4. That's my job, she said. And then she becomes a gymnast because she's got strong karmic connection with that type of activity. So this little boy, he went fishing, and this is how it works. The karmic seed is there from past killing. He meets the condition which triggers the karmic seed. It's like triggering the memory. And this is the point. The stronger, the more intense his past habit to kill, what is next triggered, once he sees it, is instant recognition. Then the same millisecond practically, what is triggered, which is the extent of how much he's killed, is the intense pleasure, joy, happy feelings. And this is all we want, is happy feelings. So the little gymnast girl sees the gymnast, now I found my purpose in life. The fisherman sees the fishing, now I found my purpose in life. But the next instant, so the karmic seed is triggered, the pleasure kicks in instantly, and the third one to kick in, and almost like all together, is the attachment that immediately comes in and then writes this dramatic, divine description of this killing of fish. So that means what he sees all his life until he was 29, he was a professional fisherman. That means because it's attachment from past habit, the intensity of the pleasure. So obviously whatever gives you pleasure, you think it's a good thing. Of course you want to go fishing again. Of course you want to torture again. Of course you want to rape again. Of course you do. It's the habit. So this is why we're locked into samsara, because we are junkies for good feelings, and good feelings means happiness. All we want is good feelings. So whatever seems to trigger it, we'll feel guilty. But look at our pathetic habits. Cake, for God's sake. We want to eat cake. You don't want to kill fish. I mean, one of my friends on death row in Kentucky, I know this dude. He's been there for years. I've got a Buddhist friend there. I've known him for 20 years, Mitchell. And he tells me about him. He said, Robina, he thinks of torture all the time. All we want to do is send a person like that to hell. We panic, you know. Why? Because he's got the habit. He's probably been in the animal realm before. Animals love to torture each other. That's their job. It's their fear and their drama and their attachment. It's habit. So he doesn't know why he wants to torture. And that means because it's a function of attachment, he thinks about it all the time. Look at us. We're thinking about food all the time. This is our pathetic habit. And look how hard it is to change the habit of eating too much food. That's just eating cake. Can you imagine if you have the tendency to jump on little girls all day, if you have the tendency to want to kill fish all day, if you have the tendency to want to torture all day because of past karma habit? This is the reason to have compassion for sentient beings, you know. So the karmic seed is there because he hasn't purified. That's the worst one. It triggered as soon as he sees the fishing. Instantaneously, pleasure is triggered. The extent of the pleasure you experience is the extent of the habit. I remember reading one Australian journalist who's dead now. He was the arts writer for the Time magazine, that American magazine. Being a very good writer. He was in love with fishing. He wrote about the first time he went trout fishing. He said it was like a cosmic experience, meaning the joy, and it's almost like people who have sex. The pleasure was so enormous. This sounds so bizarre to us, but the amount of pleasure that's triggered in your mind is the extent of the habit. So he must have had an intense habit to kill. The same with his little boy. So he thought of fishing his whole life. He defined himself as a fisherman. His entire life was programmed in terms of when he could go fishing. And this is the worst tragedy, because the attachment, the pleasure comes, and then attachment. The more pleasure there is, the more the karmic habit, the more intense the pleasure. The more intense the pleasure, the more attachment paints a divine picture. So what he saw every time he went fishing, every day in his boat for all those years, what he saw, his story that his attachment had painted, meaning he didn't see the simple evident fact that the fish was suffering. He wasn't, we think that's not possible. How can he not see those fish are suffering? He can't see it because he's blinded by his own attachment. That's exactly how we all are. You can be blinded by attachment to your divine new boyfriend, but everybody else knows he's a rapist, but you just are so blind you can't see. We're as blind as bats, and what blinds us is when, because you see him, karma's there, a feeling is triggered, pleasure are triggered, then attachment takes over and paints this picture of a divine person. So you can't see a thing. This is the suffering of attachment. It looks like love. It looks like happiness. It ain't. They're all these different components working together, which is why we have to study this clearly. This is a technology of how we maintain samsara, how we're locked into it. So this little boy, going fishing every day, always wanted his mum to go fishing. She didn't like it. She tried not to criticize her boy, but she went fishing one time. And this is the simple point. She didn't have attachment in her mind. She had no attachment to killing. That means her eyes were clear. What she saw was the facts. These little fish did not want to be in there. The fish don't have voices. They can't squeal like pigs. They're not squirting red blood. They're not, they don't have limbs and legs to jump out the boat. That's why they've got to put little lobsters in a cage. I mean, we're so stupid we can't see. We say, oh, that's just nature. We see the little poor crab or the poor lobster struggling to get out of the boat. What do you think they're doing? They're not stupid. They want to get in the water. The poor little fish, the best you can do is wriggle its little body. But he can't see that. This is the tragedy of attachment. Any attachment you've got, to get what you want, we manipulate people. Attachment manipulates people to get what we want from them. That's always the classic story, the typical one of the girl being manipulated by the boy. Oh, I thought he loved me. No, he just wanted to get in your pants, dear. But we're so naive, We're so naive. Attachment's so naive. Because we're so needy to be loved. Oh, he must love me. Yeah, he wants to just hop in your pants and leave you. Goodbye. That's a typical story. You understand? Attachment blinds us. Attachment, when we don't use it, attachment it's like a honey-covered razor blade. It looks like good. Some people who rape, that's clear. That's kind of rape. That's violent sex. But pleasant sex is the one who just loves you and leaves you. These stories we talk, Attachment makes things look nice. So that fisherman was as blind as a bat. He saw the same fish flapping their bodies as his mummy did, but his interpretation was completely different based upon his needs. This is how we are in samsara. And this is why the suffering caused by attachment is more subtle than the suffering caused by aversion. It's obvious. It's obvious, It doesn't look like suffering. So there he is all his life, killing fish, hundreds of thousands and probably millions of fish. And he's a nice boy. He doesn't go and, kill his mother. I remember one time, I always quote this one too, this Inuit, I think we used to call them Eskimos. These people live in the ice, right? So of course, due to past karma, you're born in an environment where you have no choice but to kill. That's the tragedy of killing. You're born when you're forced to kill. No choice. You created the cause to be born there. So then they used to, these people, this interview, these people, they bash the baby seals to death. Bash them on the head. That's how they kill them. So he was almost in tears, so upset that these animal rights people, how dare they criticize my culture. That's how entrenched habits are. We even cause them to become a culture, That's how religions are. Religions, cultures build up the intensity of a habit of a whole group of people. So if you're in a certain religion, you go kill the cows once a year, like the Nepali Hindus, That's how and then we honor a thing called, culture. With respect to the chosen Aboriginals, not being rude, they're just like everybody else. Their very simple life got amazing view and wonderful qualities, but they eat live creatures. They put the live creatures in their mouth. They kill them, eating them. People do that. Chinese are famous for eating the brains of monkeys that are still alive and eating fish that have been steamed quietly, but the fish is still alive. This is all the karmic habit of attachment. Therefore, you can't see the harm you're doing. So the thing is, he loves scuba diving because fishermen don't hate fish. You don't kill out. When you do things from attachment, you're not angry, but you don't see the harm you're doing. That's why it's more subtle. So he loved fish. Fishermen love the water, love fish. So he'd go down scuba diving. So he drowned one day. So Mummy, of course, thought he died doing what he loved. That's how she thought about it. When she heard this, she was shocked. So she went to Geshe-la Konchog. Even this boy called himself Salmon. Even he called himself Salmon. Sal for short. In other words, this is what attachment does. It romanticizes everything and paints this marvelous picture, and we think of it day and night. Look at our own minds. This is how we live our lives, And because it's benign, we're not trying to kill people. We're just trying to get a house and a husband. But it's hard to see how it's suffering. This is really hard to see. It's not being cruel. Buddha's just got real insight into the way the mind works, more subtle than we've got with respect to us. So he drowns. Where's he been reborn? I don't know. Go and ask Geshe-la Kontrog. So these lamas don't tell you what they see. They're totally clairvoyant. Clairvoyance is one of the low-level realizations. We've had it countless lives, Buddha says. And I'm not meaning kind of hippie-trippy, I was an Egyptian princess 14 lives ago type clairvoyance, random. I mean crystal clear, exactly seeing the past, the future, the minds of others. And you get that with samadhi. You get that when you get single point of concentration. If you want to work really hard, go to the mountains for 2 or 3 years, honey, you'll get clairvoyance. It's just part of the deal. Crystal clear. So these holy beings have this in bucket loads from Tava, and the more you progress towards Buddhahood, the more long distance your clairvoyance. And as Buddha says, we need clairvoyance to be able to benefit others. So this woman, he's renowned as very wrathful, Geshe-la Kontrog, so sweet. Lived in Vajrayogini's Pure Land, Lama Zopa said. So she asked him, where's my son reborn? They never tell you what they see normally. He said, first, so he checks his computer, checks his Google, he Googles, instantaneously his clairvoyance is crystal clear. She says the name, he sees exactly. He said, yes, first he was born in the animal realms and now he's in the hell realms. And she said, oh no, what'll I do for him? And Geshe-la kind of laughed sadly and he said, what do you mean for him? He said, for everybody. Now, I met her years later, and she's not a Buddhist, but she told me that was so moving for her mind. That was really interesting. So he could see it was beneficial for her to hear this. It's very shocking. This is the tragedy. If you look at the human realm, the vast majority of humans kill. Don't forget about the other ones. And killing is the heaviest one. So where do you think they're going to get reborn? This is logic. This is not punishment, not reward. It's rather sad and distressing. But this is the logic of this law, because we haven't purified. Now, this is the difference. Another friend of mine, I always quote this story too. She's a Buddhist and she's taken the lice out of her little boy's head. He's like 40-something now, And she said he was like 3 and he's in tears of compassion for the lice. Mummy, don't hurt them. It's their home. Leave them alone. Neither mother had taught these 2 children. They came born into this life programmed. So what was his programming? Obviously, he's got compassion for a louse in his own head. And since then, he's never killed a living being. We can deduce logically based on this view that he lived in vows of non-killing. So when you live in a vow to not kill, this is the difference. And we have to talk about this one. This is fundamental to getting out of samsara. You've got to get ahead of the game, So the fisherman, he'd been in the lower realms due to killing. He exhausted that karma because karma runs out like a petrol tank. But he hadn't purified the tendency to kill. And in his case, he also hadn't purified the experience similar to the cause, which is how he died young. That's the second way karma. 1 is the tendency and 2 is the experience. So if you're dying young or getting killed, that's the experience similar to the cause of your past killing. So clearly he had that one. Not everybody has all 3. You don't have all 3. You might have 1, but not the others. But the worst one to have is the tendency to keep harming, because that sends you straight back to the lower realms. At least if you die young but don't kill, you clean up your karma, you finish it by having it. This is hard to hear because we think it's the opposite, So this little boy, he must have lived in a vow not to kill, because vows are so powerful. Buddha loves his vows. They say that vows are like this subtle physical energy that's visible to clairvoyance. So you kneel in front of somebody whom you decide is one of your teachers, and they receive these from their teacher, who received it from their teacher, who received it from their teacher, and you could track it back in an unbroken chain of real living human beings right back to the Buddha. So you kind of plug into this power source, and then you vow, I will never kill, I will never steal, I will never this, I will never that. There's 5 vows you can take when you take refuge. So that vow, the difference is this. If you don't have a vow not to kill, listen, this is crucial how we understand karma now. It's how we create karma. How we create karma. Okay, I've got to say this first. There are 4, in our case, the seed that was triggered at the time of our death, that caused us to go to our present mummy's human womb, that was called a complete karma. And any action we do for it to be a complete karma, which is the karma that will bring what they call the fully ripened result, which is a type of rebirth, there need to be 4 things in place when you do it.
So in the case of killing, we're thinking of the fisherman, or we're thinking of the fish, or the non-killing little boy. Either way. So for the little boy. Okay. So in order, let's say the little boy who did the killing in the past. Forget that. Either way, it doesn't matter. So there's 4 things in place when you do decide to kill. So first is there has to be the mouse, the object, the living being there. That's the first of the 4 things. There's got to be the object of the action. In this case, a living being. In this case, the mouse in your kitchen. Second is your mind involved in it. This is the crucial piece. Without the mind involved in an action, you can argue there's no karma. There's some kind of something there they talk about in the Lam Rim. But the meaning of the word karma, the real meaning is referring to intention, which is I will, which is volition. That's the real meaning, mental action. I will. So the second part in relation to the mouse, there's 2 parts there. Number 2 is 2A and 2B. 2A is simply called intention. I will kill the mouse. But 2B, and these come so totally together we think they're the same thing, but they're 2 separate bits. I will kill the mouse is one thing that has no flavor in it. It's just bare bones. Then there's the motivation that impels the intention, that gives the color to the action, and that's attachment, aversion, or whatever you like. Maybe it's with a mouse, you're disgusted. How disgusting, how dare a mouse be in my kitchen? So it's anger, aversion, disgust, yuck. So that's the motivation for why you do the intent, for why the thought to kill. 3, you do the action. 4, result, dead mouse. There's more to it than this, but that's keeping it simple. That becomes the complete action of killing. Now, Margot going to have a mouse in her kitchen. The mouse is there, number 1. Number 2, intention to kill the mouse. No, she doesn't see it. 2B, motivation of anger. No, she doesn't see it. Mind is not involved, but foot goes on the mouse. She doesn't even know. 3rd is there. The action is done. 4th, dead mouse. What karma is created? You could argue there's almost no karma created. I mean, it seems logical to say no karma because the mind is not involved. There's so many actions we do like that. This doesn't mean, I get away with it. You're just ignorant. No, not like that. It's understanding how we create karma in a most simple, basic way. So now this one. Let's use the example of non-killing. And the fact is, we need, at the time of death, like I've been talking, we need our main bank vault full of delicious, intentional, strong, powerful, bucket loads of non-killing karmic seeds. We need lots of those. So now check. If you don't have a vow, and I'll explain that in a minute, if you're just a regular person, when would you create the karma of non-killing, which means when your mind is involved? So then Margot has to see the mouse. She has to consciously say, I will not kill the mouse. Her motivation has to be compassion. Then she catches the mouse and she releases it. That's the only time she will create a virtuous karma of non-killing. Every time she sees the ant, she avoids killing it. Every time she sees the mouse or the ex-boyfriend, whatever it might be. Now, the rest of the day, if she doesn't meet a mouse and doesn't meet a mosquito, there is no thought in her mind, is there? I will not kill. The only time you have the thought, I will not kill, or I'll try not to kill, is when you see the being. This is hugely important to understand. So 90% of the day, 95% of the day, Margot, and this is the interesting point, due to her past non-killing, has got a good human life. No one's killing her. She's sort of like resting on her laurels. Aren't I lucky I've got a good life? We're all like this. That's the fruit of her past work. But she's not sowing any more seeds of non-killing unless she meets a mouse. So now, if you live in a vow, the Buddha says, and Lama Zopa says, the vows are so potent that 24 hours a day, you're keeping that vow, even without intention, even no thought, while you're asleep, while in the pub having a beer with your new boyfriend. You've got a vow in your mind stream, 24 hours a day, you're ticking over virtuous karmic seeds, rich, delicious, best ones, into your non-killing bank vault. Then it's easy to get a human body. But not only that, because your vow is you vow not to kill, then that purifies those other 3 results. That puts atomic bombs under the tendency to kill. So Margot will wake up in next life when she's lived in her vows. She will wake up next life with no thought to kill. She won't get killed, and she won't have bad environmental. So the 3rd result of killing, environmental result, is the food and the water and the air, the physical world harms you. You got weakness, you get sickies, you get allergies. Look at COVID-19.
For many of us, we're not dying from COVID-19, but we are experiencing the environmental result of past killing, such that the physical world, which includes our families and humans, for us, they're the environment. Just by kissing your grandma, you die. That's environmental karma of killing. The whole world has got that one. So, if you live in vows not to kill, Margot will wake up next life with a delicious human body, no tendency to kill. She won't get killed or die young, and she'll be fat and healthy and eat whatever she wants. So do we want that? Yes, please. Then live in vows of not killing. But if you merely just not kill only when you meet the creature, and second, the main thing that usually makes karma strong is the motivation. But we don't have much virtue. We're happy to save one moth. But if your house is overrun by moths, I'm sorry, your compassion goes out the window. Attachment takes over. You kill the lot. So there's not much virtue we create. And you've got to need these. So vows are so powerful. Lama said, there's no way in the world that we can have a decent life if we don't live in vows. You can't get ahead of the game. It's like treading water, or not just treading water, taking one step and going 10 steps back. You need to have vows. Virtue practiced in the framework of keeping vows, this is the Buddhist approach anyway, is so potent. Then we can get ahead of the game. And then you purify the tendencies as well. Then that's our saving grace. So even why now maybe some of us killed in the past, but now we're Buddhists, we vowed never to kill. This is the fundamental thing. Not just that, but not steal, lie, harm, then we'll have a happy life next life. It's the logic of karma, but vows is the best way to do it. Any questions now, people? Any questions? Because if you like that little boy, this is a tragedy. I mean, this is why we're locked into samsara. This little boy, a kind person, he's got lots of good tendencies. He won the lottery, got a human body. But he hadn't purified his past killing. So then the habit is there, he meets the fish, and it's like he's like a lemming. There's no choice, virtually no choice, because who would ever question a good feeling? The minute, because we're junkies for good feelings, the moment we get a happy feeling, whatever seems to trigger it, we'll keep doing it, no matter how much the world says you shouldn't. So, and the tragedy with fishing is everybody approves of it. He didn't have, if he was attached to killing poodles, believe me, he'd have to sneak out at night and do it and be full of guilt and neurosis, because he'd get murdered if he killed a poodle.
We have a few questions
Good,
for Robina.
Good,
there's Regina and Catherine and then Tanya.
Good, so talk to me, please. Absolutely, talk to me.
Regina.
Hi. It's my name's Ginny.
Ginny,
yes.
sorry.
Go, Ginny.
Okay, so hi.
Hello, darling.
I've been on a course to do shamatha meditation.
Yes.
And I'm doing that more regularly and getting into it more deeply.
Good.
And what's surfacing for me is incredibly violent scenes of me being a male swordsman on horseback,
okay,
slashing around with his sword and chopping people's heads off and killing them.
Yes.
So I'm just assuming that's something from the past. How best do I kind of antidote that? How can I turn that into compassion?
I understand, darling. So the thing is, Ginny, if you're doing meditation, yes, the mind is very powerful. So it can trigger memories. There's no question. That's why people often have very vivid memories in dreams, because it's just subtle mind and we're more susceptible. That's very natural. So the thing is, though, it doesn't follow it's a memory of yours. It doesn't follow. It could be just some memory of something that you've seen. But either way, whatever it is, and the fact is, even if we don't remember anything, this is where the next step that we have to do to really practice abiding by the laws of karma properly, we have to first stop killing and stealing and lying and doing it in the framework of vows. But the other practice we do is then to purify. So whether you remember or not, Ginny, you've got billions of lifetimes of billions of karmic seeds. You've done billions of killing and harming and lying and stealing and all the good things as well. There's billions of actions there, but occasionally we might get a flavor of one or two. So the point is, no matter whether we see them or not, the practice of purification at the end of the day is the way to really seal the power of getting the very best of abiding by the laws of karma. As Lama Zopa says, well, you're insane not to do it every day. And now I was about to talk about this, and this is going to answer your question. So whether you remember it or not is not even the issue. You know that if you've had countless past lives, you know that you've done negative things, join the universe, and you also know you've done positive. So we want to so by living in vows, you already put atomic bombs under your habits, and you stop doing them. You stop sowing future weeds, but now you got to put atomic bombs under the seeds you've planted that before the weeds come. That's purification. And if you have live a life of vows, taking refuge, doing better practice every day, purify every day, you can die with a happy mind, honey, and guarantee you get a really good future human life so you can carry on practicing the spiritual path. So I'll discuss the purification practice, Jenny. And we can't get ahead without that either. So living in vows and purification, these are the two most powerful tools to really begin the powerful process of getting the hell out of samsara. It's the first level. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you very much.
We'll discuss it, darling. So other questions, people?
Catherine?
Yes, actually, Venerable Robina, you may have just answered my question.
Good, okay, but go on then.
I'll just add a little bit in case you can add some advice.
Yes.
If I look back on my life, I can see certain repeated patterns.
Of course.
And they appear not to be my fault, although of course they may be due to personality flaws. So I'm assuming they're past karma.
Yes.
You've talked about purification, and that is helpful.
Yes.
If you see certain specific patterns, are there ways of dealing with that and making sure it gets healed and doesn't happen again?
No, of course. So, okay.
Specifically, or...
Yes, Catherine, I understand. So what you're describing, what you're suggesting, what you're pointing to, it seems to me, is experiences at the hands of others where we're harmed. Are you talking about that?
I guess so, yes.
Yeah, very simple. That's a kind of karma called experiences similar to the cause. So trying to get the big picture. Since you're born, would you agree that some certain beings and humans in your life have treated you nicely, and some have treated you badly?
Yes.
So some have been nice and some have been bad. There's really only two options, isn't there? Would you agree with that? So then, okay, every tiny experience you've had of anybody being nice to you, the person in the shop, your beloved, your husband, your mother, all the people in your life, if you can think of them, who've been kind to you, who believe your words, who give you things, who love you, the bank manager who gave you a loan, the credit company who gave you credit. We take all these ones for granted. All the good ones, we just assume we deserve those, but the moment a bad one comes, we have a panic attack, don't we? I don't deserve it. This is not fair. We all feel that, Catherine, because we didn't in this life. You did nothing in this life to deserve it. So this is why, at least positing the view of karma in past lives, at least it's an explanation of why the hell bad things happen, but why also good things happen, Catherine. We never think of that. I've never had in all my years a person ever ask the question, Robina, why do good things happen? But if we look at our lives, honey, everybody's got suffering. Everybody's had harm. We've all got people who've harmed us. I'm not trying to diminish it, but it's really good to see it in the framework of the good things as well. That's an eye-opener for us. Then we're going to rejoice in your virtue, how incredible people love you, kind to you, the fact that you have a house, a mattress to sleep on, people, bank, money, food. Every tiny piece of this is the fruit of your incredible virtue. We should be in bliss to think this, but we just assume these are normal, then how dare bad things happen. Honey, join the universe, Catherine. This is how we all are. Do you understand me? Are we communicating?
Thank you. I will stop whinging. Thank you.
I mean, it's a tough one. But all it's doing is pointing out this is the thing, the deeper level. I'll talk about it now. In the first level of practice is like to talk about karma. Get your control under your body and speech. Put atomic bombs under your habits. Purify them. Live in vows. This is really to do with behavior, the grossest level of who we are. Now we get to the second level of practice. And this is Ginny's point. She's doing shamatha, which is the second level of practice, which is the mind. Now we have to understand the mind that drives what we think and say and do, Catherine. So the little thing I just said then, if we analyse what's involved, and we're all the same, there's two main things. Of these three poisons, Buddha tells us about the three poisons, the three toxic emotions. Sounds so cute to us. The root one, which is the main problem, which is what we finally cut when we realised emptiness, that's when we cut samsara altogether. That's called ignorance. We can call it colloquially ego grasping. This primordial, concrete, limited, unhappy sense of a separate me. It's so primordial we hardly even see it. It's like a sleeping lion most of the time. So now the main voice of that ego grasping is attachment, this bottomless pit of emotional hunger to only get the nice things. So at the deepest level, this attachment, really the only way to say it is, it's because it's so habitual from countless lifetimes, it's at the level of assumption, which is exactly what I've just described before, Catherine. So the assumption of attachment, so deep in us, so primordial, so pervasive, the assumption is, I must only get the nice things. And this sounds very cruel, but it's kind of like the hubris of attachment is because I deserve only the nice things. This is what's inbuilt in all of us, Catherine. That's why the question is so perfect. This is the way samsara is, sweetheart. We all have this assumption, this hubris that I only deserve the good. And it's so fascinating. Of course, we don't ask the question, why do we think we deserve good? And why do we think we don't deserve bad? So attachment is the assumption I only deserve the good. So then when the good comes, that's why we don't take it, that's why we take it as for granted. Well, I deserve it, so give me more, please. We don't say, wow, how fortunate. Some people do. Oh, I've got a mattress to sleep on. Aren't I fortunate? I must have created so much virtue in the past. I better keep creating virtue. It's like you've got to, so this is why the analogy of gardens is a great one. So before we finish that, then there's the aversion. So aversion is the bare bones state of mind, the volatile expression of which is anger, the more subtle expressions of which are annoyed, irritated, upset, frustrated, and the most subtle expression of which is called depression and despair. They're all on a spectrum. And aversion is the panic attack that arises when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And that's saying, how dare that happen to me? I don't deserve it. Can you hear me, Catherine? It's so naked. Yes. It's so fascinating if we see it without guilt, but observe the workings of it. So attachment and aversion run the universe. We assume we deserve good, and if we look into the world, forget ourselves, we can see some people, the greed of giving me the good things, that's what's happening. You see it in some people. It's so naked. I only deserve the good. And then we have a complete mental breakdown when the tiniest bad thing happens. This is unpacking aversion and attachment at a much subtler level, and we can see it, Catherine. It's so amazing. So let's analyze what deserve means. We use those words. We say that. It's such a powerful feeling. And that's the stronger the attachment is, the assumption I only deserve the good, the more powerful the panic attack of aversion or anger, which means I don't deserve it, is. This is the relationship between these two, and we run between these two all day. This is what Buddha is saying is the essence of being in samsara. And all the other delusions like jealousy and aggression, jealousy and like arrogance and low self-esteem, these are branches of these. These are the primordial ones. So let's analyze what it means, deserve and not deserve. It's very fascinating. So let's just think. I always think of simple examples like your garden. You would if you've got a garden, Catherine, the fact is, you know it's your garden. You know that means logically that whatever is in that garden, you take responsibility for automatically. So you would never say when you walk out one day, who put weeds in my garden? I don't deserve weeds. You'd never say that, would you? Ever. Because you know it's your garden and the weeds are yours. You mustn't have realized they were there and you haven't pulled them out. So there's never a sense that someone else put them in my garden. That's paranoia, but that's how we believe about life. So in other words, our life is our garden, Buddha's basically saying, and whatever is in your garden since the time you're born, Catherine, you put it there. So all the people who are kind to you, they're your flowers and your veggies. You created them. This is very powerful because we feel so separate from the outside world. But everything, as Lama Zopa says, is our karmic appearance. So when you see people who've been kind to you, you see veggies in your garden, you will never take them for granted. You, for 1 second, you won't just greedily eat them up and then wonder why nobody else puts more veggies in your garden. You will have such a sense of responsibility. You will know that's the fruit of your past virtue. You will eat your veggies with delight and you'll eat up and you'll be happy with that, and then you'll grow more veggies because you know it's your garden and it's cause and effect. That's how you apply karma to your life. You don't ever take anything for granted. Every tiny good thing that happens, you know you planted it. Every tiny rubbish thing that happens, you know you must have planted that or at least not pulled it out. So you learn from it. It's such a rich way to look at life. Then there's ownership, there's accountability, there's no victim, there's no feeling of I'm a victim, it's not fair, I didn't ask to get born, because that's how we believe. We believe we didn't ask to get born. We believe somebody else made us. It's like a conspiracy theory. Who put weeds in my garden I don't deserve? Give me the flowers I do deserve. There's real hubris there. This is attachment and aversion. This is suffering. This is ego. Join the universe, honey. Are we communicating?
Thank you.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's a powerful one to have to practice doing. This is not going to happen overnight, honey. It means you've got to grab it every time. And keep thinking your life's your garden and whatever's in there. You didn't do anything now. You're completely innocent now. It's true. But this is the suffering. If you don't posit karma, this is why it's interesting. If philosophical materialism is our view, I'm not criticizing, then there is no explanation for why bad things happen. But there's also no explanation for why good things happen. So we just kind of cross our fingers and say, well, no one's found out yet. So no wonder we're neurotic. No wonder we blame our parents and blame here and blame there and have mental breakdown, because we don't have a view in our mind about why. And we always ask why. Our major suffering is, why did that happen to me? The major suffering when we see suffering people out there is, why is that happening? But if you have the view of karma, at least you have a theoretical explanation that you can apply, that calms your mind down, that helps change the way you live your life, Do you understand?
Yes.
So if you're a Christian, that's different. You see, this is the thing is, Buddha's saying we are the ones who do it. So we have to learn the law. But the Christians say God is the boss. He's got a plan. We don't care if God tells us his plan. We have faith in God. That also will be a good cause to be happy, because you know that God's plan. That's profound. But this is not the Buddha's view, that's all. It's a very powerful one to see the hubris of attachment. And this is assumption. It's so deep we even puzzle by it. What do you mean, why do good things happen? We don't even think that question. And the fact that we only ask why bad things happen shows very powerfully where our minds are at, It's very, very fascinating. Thank you, Catherine. So helpful. What else, people?
Thank you.
Good, darling.
I think, Tanya, did you have your hands up earlier or not? Please unmute yourself, and then Gabi.
I did, but Venerable Robina, as usual, has answered my question before I voiced it.
Okay, great. Well
okay.
Then, Gabi, you have your hand up. Please unmute yourself.
Good, Gabi. Go, darling. Talk to me.
Yeah, talk to you, Venerable Robina.
Hello,
nice
sweetheart.
to see you.
Yes.
I really enjoy you make Samsara sound like a crime story. I really like that.
Good. We've got to get enthusiastic, I think.
Yeah, you are.
Good.
That's fine. That's what I love about you.
Good,
listen, in terms of attachment, can you say something about addictions? Because those are very strong forms of attachment as well, aren't they?
That's all they are. Stronger forms of attachment. So we put it this way, Gabby. This is the point, isn't it? We can see that if we think of karma as one way that karma ripens is the habit to do it. That's very clear. That's the first kind. The intentions or tendencies similar to the cause. So clearly you could say, but we don't talk about it in our culture this way, we say that fisherman was completely addicted to fishing. Would you agree with that? Can you see what I'm saying? He thought about it all the time. That's addiction. But because we consider it a normal event, we don't think it's an addiction or even an attachment. It's just, oh, he's in love with fishing. We call it a nice thing. So if you're addicted to people, like, for example, okay, the only time we call about addiction, attachment, is when it's to things that will harm our body and distress us, like drugs, like alcohol, like maybe these days jumping on 22 boys every day, whatever it is. But we usually only think of addiction when it comes to something that looks like it's bad. But if it's something that's good, like cooking for people, this is not being critical. All I'm suggesting is the Buddha's view of attachment, addiction, is that attachment is addiction, but it's a question of degree. And it's a question of the object. So certain activities, we don't think, because it seems like a good activity, we don't call it addiction. But a person could be obsessed with food day and night, and making food and cooking food all day, all night, thinking of food. Well, of course that's an addiction. But because it's something fairly benign, we think, it's not like harming people, we don't think of it as addiction. So attachment is addiction, Gabby. It's a question of degree and a question of the object. Do you see what I'm saying? The broader view in Buddhism. So obviously, you could redeem your addiction to food if you try to make other people happy with it. You could say you could sort of redeem or mitigate your attachment to having a lovely house, obsessively cleaning all day, never stop thinking about it, by at least thinking it's a house to help other people be happy. So some actions are all driven by attachment, there's no question. That's daily life. But we can make them a bit more virtuous, this is the Bodhisattva path, by offering to others. But there are some habits that seem quite intense that aren't helpful to anybody. So at least this is why the first level of practicing in Buddhism is to at least stop harming others. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So that the guy who's addicted to fishing,
He's addicted to fishing, honey. He taught about fishing day and night. He's never thought of anything else. That was what addiction means. But we don't think of it as addiction. We just think, isn't that wonderful? He loves fishing. My friend in prison, addicted to torture, that's a problem. But we wouldn't call that an addiction. We just call him evil. Right? Are you seeing what I'm trying to get at here? It's a broader way of understanding that we're all driven by attachment, Gabby. This is the universe, and this goes to a level of subtlety way more than we can imagine. So attachment in general is simply addiction. It's a question of degree and the object. So this is a more radical level of practice. We want to give up all attachment. But that's hard for us because then we chuck out the baby with the bathwater and think we're not supposed to have food, sex, drugs. We're not discussing the object. We're discussing the mind that's obsessive, you know. That's the broader picture of what a Buddhist practice really is. Are we communicating, do you think? Yep. So we obviously have, this is why the first level of practice is, Buddha's not talking about seeing your mind yet. He says, don't kill, don't steal, don't follow attachment, don't harm others. He's not even saying yet, don't be a junkie, because that's only you. The very first level is don't harm others, because they're the heaviest ones. They all harm you as well, but then you can start to extrapolate and go, well, that means I better stop eating 14 pieces of cake. Maybe I've got to stop taking heroin. Maybe I've got to stop giving up. You know, do you understand? You start to see that even the actions, that addictions that harm you only, that's the next level of practice. The first one is at least don't harm others. You with me?
Yeah.
Gabby? Good, darling.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you so much.